Live on tape, Work in Progress, a World at Work podcast about work, life, and everything in between. With award-winning radio host Tom Alexander and WorkSpan's Not Safe for Work columnist Charles Epstein. Here are your hosts, Tom and Charles.
Welcome to Work in Progress. My name is Tom Alexander, and of course, as always, I'm joined by my partner and good friend, Mr. Charles Epstein. Hey, Charles.
Hey, Tom. Episode 18. It feels like only a week ago. We were wrapping episode 17. How fast time flies, huh?
Yes. And it's funny how they work in sequential order, too.
Yeah, 7 days to a week, and all that, and year in, year out, it's the same thing. Extraordinary. Anyway, the other day, somebody sent in a resume and cover letter, and every so often I'll get something like that in over the transom, and they vary widely. I would say wildly. In quality and breadth, relevance, but its cover it was actually pretty good. Some of them were just awful, actually, and so it was kind of an outlier that came in. It was good, and I think cover letters are kind of a lost art.
Definitely, I think they oftentimes people don't even send cover letters. Yeah,
they don't bother. They'll just send an email. They'll attach the resume and. That's about it. But it did get me thinking about some of the zanier cover letters I did in my day, which is actually almost expected. You're looking for a job as a copywriter at Madison Avenue, an ad agency, and so forth. You want to do something that's a little bit crazy that's going to get you attention. Some worked, some didn't. But as I was thinking this, I was actually reminded of the times, a cover letter and a resume got me called in. For what I thought was going to be an interview, but they turned into something of a job audition. Did it ever happen? You ever get that? I'm sure you have. What you do, I'm sure you have.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And I've been on. I've had a few of those, more than a few of those, and I will say that a couple I've gotten pretty creative with, going the fact that they're creative jobs you're going for, right? As a writer or writing commercials or whatever it is, scripts. And I actually sent one in one time, well, more than once. I've done this several times, actually, going back in my days of pursuing that kind of work, sending in a script. Actually sending in the cover letter was a script in how it would actually play out. Busy office, typewriters in those days, typewriters clacking away and all that stuff. And Tom walks into reception area, sits down and makes eye contact with the receptionist and eagerly awaits meeting with higher up, that kind of a thing. And then play it out, that kind of a situation. And it actually did get me called in on a couple times.
Well, it's not a matter of just showcasing creativity. It's sort of auto-suggestion. You're making them imagine you at the workplace. So 2/3 of the way, you're already there.
Yes.
So you're doing already some pretty heavy lifting. So that's a good technique. I like that. I remember I had my own PR firm at the time, still do, of course, same firm. And I was called in by another PR firm for what I thought was a conversation about partnering on some projects. I was, pretty established and all that, only to be asked to take a writing test. I didn't remember at the time when, I was last asked to take a writing test. So I was put off, to say the least, but rather than get angry, I said, sure. The head of the company, I think it was Mr. Johnson or some such. I said, sure, so long as Mr. Johnson is okay with taking Backbone's reading comprehension test, no problem.
That's great. Yeah, that's great. Well, yeah. I'll tell you what time. Part of what I do is I do voice work and on sometimes on screen and certainly on mic,
and sometimes actually on this very podcast.
Yes.
I would dare say some of your best work.
Oh, wow, thanks. But I got called in one time, and I went through it, and I thought, boy, I am nailing this thing, and I just they're laughing, they're nodding their heads, they're
crying, they're calling their mothers, their aunts. Can't believe this.
It's unbelievable.
Can't believe we're present for this.
Jotting things down, calling people in. Anyway, I'm thinking, all right, I'm just thinking to myself, this is beautiful. I really like it. And then they say, okay, why don't you just go in the waiting area for just a moment, and we'll be right with you. I was thinking, okay, and I'm already got the money spent, and then they call me back in, and they said, okay, so anyway, just wanted to let you know that we're going to go ahead and take a pass. So now you got to understand, when you hear the words okay with an upward inflection, and we're going to go ahead,
yes,
which sounds very positive.
Sure.
And to take a pass. Now, it's like the ultimate rug being pulled out from under you, because you really think when you hear go ahead, you go forward and then take a pass. No, folks,
put that coffee down. Coffee's for closers only.
Listen, you don't go forward or move ahead to take a pass. I'm sorry, that's not how that works.
No.
Bad language.
No.
Bad choice of words.
Yeah, well, but a great head fake.
It is the ultimate head fake.
Great
that
head
is
fake.
An ankle breaker. Buddy.
Yes, leaves your pro kid stuck to the gym floor. That's a tough one. That's a tough one. I just got to share one real quick one.
Sure.
And I think I have told this to you before. I answered an ad calling for a writer for an erotic book company. I'm thinking to myself, oh my God, I've got to do this just for the experience.
Yeah.
So I loaded up on some Anais Nin and a little bit of Marquis de Sade. I figured that would cover a pretty good range of content and prepare me. I get there only to realize, well, this is not erotica. This is as hardcore as it gets. But the signature of this particular publishing company was, I guess, what you'd call science fiction porn. Don't ask.
Wow.
In any case, I came with about 5 single-spaced pages of erotica.
Uh-huh.
And then the guy who interviewed me, who I think was a publisher, actually, it was a pretty small imprint. Pretty small imprint.
Yeah.
But so he asked if I'd sit down for about a half hour and just come up with a scenario. The job called for pounding out a novel a week. 125 pages. They'd give you some ludicrous scenario, and you'd have to write this book. So all of a sudden, again, I thought I was going to be writing this very elaborate, sinuous, lush erotica. Now, all of a sudden, I had to come up with some crazy sci-fi theme and write the most basic porn imaginable.
Professor.
Yes, dear.
Will there be any extra credit?
I am so glad you asked.
Anyway, I gave it my level best. I gave the guy, I think I asked for 10 more minutes, in fact. So that indicates either I was having a little bit of a ride. No, I think I was kind of going with it. In any case, I gave it to the guy. And I was expecting and hoping to at least be called back. I wanted to say, no, I'm not going to take this job. What are you, out of your mind? I never did get that call back. My only real regret is that I never got a copy of the thing that I wrote in the 30 minutes he gave me, because that might have been hilarious.
Oh man, wow, what a great stuff. Science fiction porn. I guess the tagline would have been something like, in outer space, no one can hear you moan.
I like it.
Yeah.
I like it. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. There are a lot of other images that come to mind in outer space, but that's certainly one of them. Yes.
Yeah,
nice.
that would be one of them. We need to move on, Charles.
We do.
Jude Sotherland will join us. Corporate consultant and author who will be on to discuss pay equity, and veteran character actor since the 1980s, it's John Kapelos. He'll join us as well. This is Work in Progress. Back after these words.
what to do when you need external HR expertise. Head on over to World at Work's vendor directory, kind of like the Yelp of HR, but without the biases. It's where to turn when you're looking for resources and providers in the world of HR, from legal services to compensation management, to loyalty programs, to exec comp, to relocation services, and so much more. You'll find pros in the vendor directory, a seemingly endless reserve of vetted, trusted HR providers. Visit worldatwork.org and take a look.
Sotherland is a corporate consultant, author, and guest speaker on current employment issues facing America's employers. Jude brings a unique perspective to employment issues by capitalizing upon her experience as both a public policy analyst within the executive branch and consultant to some of the leading global employers. Jude joins us now from her office from Merritt Island, Florida, just a short 2.5 hours north of us. Hey, Jude, how are you?
Good afternoon. I'm doing well today. Thank you for having me on.
Well, it's great to have you, and please say hello to my partner, Charles Epstein.
Hey, Jude.
Good afternoon, Charles.
Yes. I think this is our first podcast. We're all calling in from Florida. So this is a happy coincidence. And it turns out, Jude, that we're talking in a rare these days storm-free interlude. So that's also good news. Anyway, just want to let you know, Jude, sort of the elephant in the room between Tom and me is we typically select a song to play our guests on with. We just want to let you know that we're going to resist the obvious choice, but we think it's a good excuse to play something from the Beatles catalog, so long as you don't object. Is that okay?
That's great. Thank you.
You're good. Actually, I see that you have an economics and psych degree credentials. That would actually make for a very good book on the Beatles and Apple Records if you so chose to accept the assignment.
Well, I was actually named Jude after the patron saint of hopeless cases. It was a labor and delivery story. So imagine, 25, 30, 40 years later, I'm going into corporate America saying, my name is Jude. I was named after the patron saint of hopeless cases, but I'm here to help. Right?
That's an even better story. Wow. That's great. Before we get into some of the nitty gritty of the pay equity issue, because I know that's something we want to dig into a little bit, and I know that's a special area. As you may know, I don't know, I write this column called Not Safe for Work for Workspan. Usually take a somewhat skewed approach to all these business HR benefits issues. And last week, my editor assigned me the near impossible task of making pay equity humorous. So either she vastly overestimates my ability to be humorous, which is possible, or it's her idea of making me sweat. I really don't know the answer to that. But anyway, Jude, is there any way you can help me on this? Is there any aspect of pay equity that our audience might find even in the least bit funny?
Yeah, it's a tough one because our pay is very personal, and that goes even amongst white men. Sometimes when you get up to the C-suite, they're arguing over who's got the office closer to the CEO. And in the old days, we used to say they were counting the ceiling tiles, the 12 by 12 tiles, to see whose office was bigger and proximity. I do have one that's somewhat humorous. And this comes from someone, because people often share with me what's going on in their world outside of me being a consultant. And I had a young lady call me, and she said, "You won't believe this." She said, "I've done all my homework. I know my market value. I know my industry. I know exactly what I should command in a salary to onboard at another company. And they sought me out." So that's an ideal situation to be in when they're seeking your talent as opposed to you going in and trying to get a job. So she was in this interview, and she was making the pitch for a total rewards package, the base, the bonus, the reload, the whole bit. And the manager was trying to push back and telling her that it's sort of unreasonable to command that sort of salary. And she was holding firm, and she's a very, very good negotiator. So he went the total rewards route, and he said, well, you're probably not aware that we have a wonderful benefits package and healthcare benefits and the whole bit. And then he said, for example, you can have as many mammograms as you want in a year. And she calls me howling because she said it was as if he thought that was the same as going to the spa or something. That this would be, I mean, women don't go have as many mammograms as they want in a year.
No.
But that was his idea.
Yeah. I'm sorry, by the way, Jude, I just need to interject that that wouldn't be funny either. For instance, if you're going to tell me that it's all the digital rectal exams you wanted, I don't think that would be attractive either, which I think is probably the male counterpart to that.
Yeah, exactly. But he thought it was, he didn't think it was funny. She did.
Yeah, well, you know what? I was going to say that I was imagining the punchline being, excuse me, ma'am, but this is an Arby's, but your punchline is much better.
Because it is for those who feel that they're paid dissimilarly because of race or gender. There's not a lot that's funny about it. And often it's our own mistakes and not negotiating well. And we just learn as we move on. And that goes across race and gender. You know, men learn as they negotiate and move on as well.
Sure.
Yeah. Jude, there are many laws preventing wage salary discrimination, yet it persists. Why do you think this is?
I think it's for several reasons. And let's focus on it being discrimination or bias. Not lawful reasons. And one is, I think it's the totality of a lot of discrete individual decisions. And I'll give you an example, and this is one I use a lot in corporate America. Those who are good employees, the C-rated employee or the 3 performer on a 5-point scale. You need them. They're putting in their 8 hours a day. They're hardworking, but they're not necessarily going to be leaders because that's all they're going to give you. They're not going to stay late. They're not going to want to go into management. When I review proactively for employers merit increases tied to ratings, it is amazing in that category of a good performer or a 3 out of a 5, the differential I see often between men and women or between ethnic subgroups. Right there in a good, hardworking C category. And when I take this to senior management, it's really the totality of a lot of individual discrete decisions that can create a pattern of something that needs further investigation. So sometimes it's overt. Overt might be Department of Labor had a settlement a year ago where women were placed in the front of a dry cleaning shop and the men were in the back. And they had more heavy lifting and things, but they were paid more. So the women were steered into lower paid jobs at the front with the customers, even though several had expressed an interest to go earn more in the back. Likewise, at least one gentleman wanted to go to the front because he had back issues, and they precluded that from happening. So that steering of women into traditional roles and men into non-traditional roles, often at a higher pay, could be seen as another form of discrimination that still continues today.
Yeah, and to follow up, 10 years ago, it's been 10 years already, President Obama signed the Lilly Ledbetter Fair Pay Act. Didn't that help with pay equity?
What it did, in essence, it was the first law he signed into law. What it did is it reminded all, or it put into effect, the fact that anytime you receive a paycheck or an annuity, if it was based upon discrimination, you can still file an EEOC charge. So he basically signed a law that Lilly Ledbetter could have moved forward with her private right of action because she didn't find out she was being paid less than some male peers until she actually was retiring, and someone slipped her wage and 3 male peers in management's wages in her box so that she saw at the end of her career there, she was being paid a lot less than the men, even though she had no problems with starting salary. This wasn't litigated on its merits to the full extent. So it'd be interesting to know if she had gone forward after he signed this act and had it litigated, what would have come down? Because in a 20-year span of one's lives, even if you start out at the same or similar pay, a lot of things can happen. You can take leave of absence. You can have a differential in performance. You can have bonuses or larger merit increases. Just so much can happen. I think in her case, a rift had happened to her. So those sort of things make things unequal in pay over the course of one's life, which makes the whole concept of litigating discrimination over one's lifetime at an employment setting so difficult.
Mm. Well, I think you just definitively proved that there is no way of making this topic at all funny, Jude. It's fascinating. It's interesting. And as you can see, we're getting into the weeds here. But yeah, I don't even think Don Rickles could do anything with this.
Yeah, I had a woman call me one day, and she said, "You won't believe what I'm doing." I said, "No idea." And she was driving a file across state. And she said she said to her manager, "I can zip file this." He said, "No, I want you to take it." And so she said, "Can we send it by courier?" And she knew he was just poking her, poking her. And whether,
Right.
So she was driving across state. She was an hour across state. And he called and he goes, "Hey, I just zip filed and sent it. You can come on back."
Oh, my God.
So she decided to take the circuitous route. She was stopping and having lunch, picking up dry cleaning, filling her car up with gas. Kind of like, you got to see the humor in it sometimes,
Yeah. Well, good for her. Anyway, getting back into the fun stuff here, but
Yeah.
it is interesting. I kid. It is fascinating stuff, and we've spoken to several other people on this issue, this technology company, and they come to this from a very interesting perspective, and others, and so forth. So it's just so incredibly nuanced, and you shake one part of the spider web and it reverberates throughout. So it's a hard thing to just isolate. It's tough stuff. Anyway, I know there have been efforts to change the Equal Pay Act since at least '97 when the Paycheck Fairness Act was first introduced, and I know the 2019 HR 7 passed the House earlier this year. Does it stand a chance in the Senate?
I would probably say it's 50-50. It's going to have a tougher road in the Senate, but a lot of the provisions of that HR 7, the Paycheck Fairness Act, are already being implemented by the states. So many of the states, I believe almost all states now have a new pay equity, Equal Pay Act provisions. And so some of the same provisions in that act are being enforced at the state level. So it could be by the time it works its way through the Senate, there's not much of a difference than what some of the states are doing. For example, a lot of the states now are making sure that one's prior wage isn't part of negotiations when you apply to a job. So an employer couldn't ask you or me, what were you earning at your prior job? That would now be something that would be frowned upon or illegal in almost all states. The way employers may get around it, though, is it's perfectly lawful at this point to say, what are your salary expectations? So, that sort of gives the employer a framework of what you're going to be asking for in salary. Because in this, so much has changed since I started in this business, especially the birth of the internet and people applying to jobs they may not even be qualified for or in the wage range of. So one way to get through applications very quickly is to do a keyword search. So if people are pricing themselves out of the market by saying their salary expectations are more than I can pay, they just wouldn't even come into my screen as somebody I'd want to vet. So, a lot of this is being done electronically, due to algorithms. So I think some of the provisions will already be enforced at the state level. It's just, the United States Congress right now isn't moving out very swiftly on almost anything. So I'm of both minds. It could, because so much is being done at the state level.
Yeah. I'm sure you follow the U.S. women's soccer team and their run in the World Cup, ultimately victorious. And when they won, there were chants from the arena, pay equity. I should say, as an aside, the star of the team, Megan Rapinoe, it appears, I don't know if I'm talking out of school right now, but it appears she's going to be speaking at an upcoming World at Work event. And we're hoping to get her on this podcast, which would be very, very cool. But, when that happened, it seemed it created a lot of buzz around this issue. Things are so ephemeral. The news cycles, 24-hour news cycles, something's in the news and it gets eclipsed by something the very next day, if not even before then. So there was some buzz. Do you think that there's something in the air that this whole issue is ripe for change, or at least sentiment is starting to move in one direction or another?
I do. With regard to the soccer, women's soccer versus men's soccer, my understanding, and I'm obviously not involved in the private right of action, is it comes down to revenues. So if the men's World Cup brings in 4 to 6 billion with a B, and the women's World Cup brings in, let's say, 131 million, the amount that they have to distribute amongst the players is going to be vastly different. So that's not unusual in the world of sports. I was a women's rower through high school, college, and then afterwards with competition teams. And rowing always had to go up head-to-head with the likes of football or sports that brought in a lot of revenue. And that was always the case. The sports that had a lot of revenue got more scholarships, better uniforms, more being able to go all over the country, for example, and do demonstration games. Whereas your golf, rowing, tennis, sports that didn't have a large revenue base always sort of had the crumbs, if you would. We never had quite the money that your revenue-enhancing sports bring in. I think a lot is changing right now with regard to greater enforcement, because in the Equal Pay Act, you can lawfully pay people differently because of such things as if you have a seniority system. By that I mean a straight seniority system, or based upon merit, or how fast they work, or how much they produce in an hour, the piece rate, if you will. But the fourth exception that's been on the books since 1963 is you can pay individuals differently by gender if it's not tied to their gender, if it's something other than gender. And a lot of women have felt that that's just been too broad. It hasn't been defined on what it could be. So a lot of the states and the bills up on the Hill right now are articulating what those items could be, such as educational attainment, things that may influence the job, your credentials, your certifications, as opposed to leaving that provision of any other factor as long as it's not gender. They're trying to close the loophole. And I think that makes sense. I think it makes sense to make sure that everything is on par, if you will, or people are being properly paid, as opposed to having to prove something that you don't have the information on. I think education is very easy to find. Credentials, certifications, you either have them or you don't.
Yeah, I think if all goes well, a little bit down the road, we'll be able to say it's all about the Tubmans.
What I find interesting now is employers are stepping into this arena and running big data for their whole workforce, and often coming up with equity reports saying we have no pay equity issues. What they don't do is they don't share those reports with us, but they do large, broad brush, probably regression analyses, and they find there to be no differential that's of note. We as a nation have not and probably cannot come up with what that differential should be in dollar or percentage terms. We've tried over the years. At one point, the Department of Labor was saying, 2% or $2,000 difference between people in the same role. And then it moved to 5% or $5,000. And the bottom line is, even if it's 2% or $2,000, if you're the person on the low end, you want that $2,000.
Sure.
The other thing we're seeing is more women going into the STEM fields. So that's one thing, is educational attainment going into science, tech, engineering, and math, which we're going to need. You look at our infrastructure, we're going to need a lot of engineers in the future, not just in systems. So you are starting to see women not only going into the field, but staying in. The dropout rate is going down of women leaving the STEM fields while they're in college. But even that, I think the schools, high schools and colleges can do more to support women and ethnic minorities going into these non-traditional fields.
We're speaking with Jude Sotherland. She's a corporate consultant, author, and guest speaker on current employment issues facing America's employers. And Jude, one more question. What can the compensation professional do at this time to help employers navigate?
Certainly. There's several things. One is, I have never met a CEO who wants to know about the history of all the employees. They're more concerned about, right now, under my watch, I want to make sure under my watch we have, whether you call it pay equity, equal pay, proper pay, fair pay. I want to make sure things are good. So one thing the compensation professional can do is look at starting salaries. And by this, I mean some real good employers are starting to capture the starting salary of new hires versus some others in the same or similar job. So you might have a new director of finance coming in, and you have two other directors. One might be a finance international, one might be finance division. If they're all in a similar cluster, if you will, or similar jobs, just capture the three, why you're paying this new person what they're being paid, and put it in their personnel file. Because capturing and reviewing starting salaries is very important to ensure non-discrimination, because it's very hard to make up that delta from your starting salary the rest of your career. If you're 5 and 7% less, your merit increase is never going to catch up with that difference that you had at the start. I would also say make sure that you're reviewing merit increases based upon your guidelines. It's not uncommon for me to find people who are the exceptions to the rule. I know, for example, if it says, a water walker, someone who's a 5 rated shouldn't get above 7%. Sometimes I see 8, 9, and 10%. So we should be reviewing all those exceptions to whatever our policies are to make sure there's not a picture being formed. That's not all going to one type of person, one group, one ethnicity, but that there's valid reasons if we're going to deviate from our rules in any of these practices. And lastly, I would like to ask the rewards professional, even in this era of people wanting pay transparency, if you can't describe your system, encourage your managers to talk with their employees during performance appraisals about what it is needed to move to the next level. That kind of transparency is very important for people to understand what they need to take responsibility for to move to the next level, as opposed to trying to navigate in uncharted water and not having any idea. What happens down the road is they say, wow, if you told me I had to do that, I would have said, yes, I will, or no, I can't. I had an executive say to me the other day, I really wanted to offer this woman this job overseas, but about 5 years ago, she said she didn't want it. And I said, did you ask her now? And he goes, no, I haven't. He circled back. She said, I'd love to do it. So our personal life changes as well. I thought she had a responsibility to sort of say to him as well, hey, I'm back in on that if that comes up again, that globally aligned position. But it doesn't harm us to circle back and ask people, in the past you didn't want to go the management route. Would you like to? I know some employers don't want pay transparency, but we should start talking about at least job growth transparency so that people understand what it takes to move up through the system.
Jude, we really do appreciate your time today joining us. Thank you so much.
Appreciate it. I'm sorry I couldn't come up with anything very humorous.
No, you did. You did. In fact, we have to cut a promo, and I think that bit about the free mammograms may make the cut, Jude. So thank you very much.
No problem. I appreciate your time.
Jude Sotherland brings a unique perspective to employment issues by capitalizing upon her experience as both a public policy analyst within the executive branch and consultant to some of the leading
What to do when you need external HR expertise? Head on over to World at Work's vendor directory, kind of like the Yelp of HR, but without the biases. It's where to turn when you're looking for resources and providers in the world of HR, from legal services to compensation management to loyalty programs to exec comp to relocation services and so much more. You'll find pros in the vendor directory, a seemingly endless reserve of vetted, trusted HR providers. Visit worldatwork.org and take a look.
John Kapelos has acted in TV shows from Seinfeld, The X-Files, Miami Vice, all the way to Modern Family, West Wing, NCIS, and many others. His film appearances include The Breakfast Club, Weird Science, The Late Shift, and The Shape of Water, among many others. John, it is great to have you. Welcome.
It's good to be welcomed.
Well, you know, it's just nonstop. But every time I talk to you, it seems like you're working, and I'm glad you took some time out to join us. Please say hello to my partner, Charles Epstein.
Hello, Charles. How are you?
Hey, John, I'm doing well. Thanks for spending a little bit of time with us. You're on the West Coast as we speak, I assume?
Yeah, I mean, and it's pretty hot out here. It's frying up, but I'm on the hot West Coast, yes.
Well, I think it's a hot coast to coast. It just so happens right now it's storming outside. It's a very dramatic setting we got over here. But yeah, an impressive array of credentials. 40 years. Sounds like fairly evenly distributed between TV and film. These days, are you doing more work in one medium or the other?
Well, the funny thing is, with the advent of Netflix, we're sort of into this hybrid thing of, well, is it TV if it's a long-form 12-part series that is only going to, go that length? So, yeah, it's television, but it's a different sort of television, that's for sure. And, there is a resurgence of things like the movie of the week, which disappeared in the 70s, and that's sort of a movie, but it's a television thing. Everything ends up in the pipeline. I think there's still a distinction between movies and television naturally, but the movies that, I have been in and continue to be in seem to be, less and less the fare of Hollywood or how films are made. In the earlier days, there was a rule, like when I started out in the late 70s and 80s, that television actors did not become film stars. And that was smashed by Tom Hanks and Robin Williams thoroughly. And like that happened 82, 84. But, really, there was a rule like, any major TV star of the 70s, like the $6 Million Man or whoever the heck, none of them became movie stars, right? Movie stars out of TV came out of the sort of the Hollywood's kind of understanding of television a bit more and uniting with it, I think, as opposed to being opposed to it. You know what I'm saying? When television arose in the 50s and 60s, there was a dichotomy, I think. So when I came into the business, that notion was smashed. So I had no real. In the early days, I said, "Oh, this is a." Honestly, when I worked with Tom Hanks and Nothing in Common, I thought he was just a TV actor, right? That was my personal attitude when I met him. And then he blew me away when I worked with him. And then, of course, he became Tom Hanks. And also Robin Williams, who knew he was going to be able to do things like The Birdcage, etc., that he could discipline himself. He did some beautiful roles and also smashed that maxim. And then you can name a bunch of other people that came out of that. I do believe, honestly, good movies are forever, and they last. They are definitely in a different category.
Yeah, I was just going to say, you touched on Netflix changing really how we view movies, TV. That has clearly blurred the line. And these days, as you well know, I don't know when it started. I don't know if you could mark it with Sopranos, the so-called advent of prestige TV, if that's the way you want to look at it. Certainly, the quality of stuff you're seeing on quote-unquote TV, Sopranos and The Wire, 6 Feet Under, and we can go on and on and on. And you see, that's where you're seeing some people from the movies happily jump into these roles, where I'm assuming it's very rewarding, where you can develop these character arcs and the narrative arcs over 5, 6, 12 episodes. It almost combines movies and theater.
The thing is that 10 years ago, maybe short 8, 10, 12 years ago, people were lamenting the fact that most of the television landscape was being eaten up by reality TV. and there was no written, scripted shows were on the wane. And what this has done is revitalized the scripted world in a major league way. And you can probably credit, as you just did, The Sopranos, and then a lot of HBO's programming, Game of Thrones, etc. And, also the fact that movies, are getting to be these $350 million behemoths that are more akin to theme park rides, and indeed become theme park rides, When I started acting in films, or, getting involved in films actively around, let's say, 82, 83, 84, Breakfast Club, 16 Candles, Thief, Tootsie in there, movies were like $15 million, They were, you can go back and look at it, but the budgets were really not that big, nothing, so it's like, they don't make them like that anymore for a variety of reasons. My parents used to lament that about films in the 40s, but, and I think the advent of this long form thing is in Netflix shows once again that people are interested in good stories and interesting arcs. Boardwalk Empire, and I'm watching, I'm sure you could name 3 shows. I could name 2 or 3 shows that you're watching on Netflix or Amazon Prime that are of interest that aren't on network,
Yeah. John, tell us a little bit about the arc of the process, actually, of auditioning, then learning you've landed the role, then prepping for that role.
I think the best way to approach it is just to, when you get the sides and you realize what the project is, you gobble up the sides as soon as possible and you memorize them. Now, it's becoming less and less prevalent for me to go in and meet people. Either I'm offered something or I go on tape myself. But the process, such that it is when you go in for an audition, is you, and I still get into auditions, is just memorize it and go in, and if you're meeting with the director, if you have read the script, try to understand the script as best as possible and see where they're pitching it, what sort of film they're making and how they're looking at it, and then you try to make your character go accordingly. Absorbing the character and understanding who he is the whole process of saying, yeah, I like this character and I like this role and these sides that you're giving me. You've absorbed that, and then you'll be able to talk to them on some level and then give a performance that is not picture perfect, but pretty near picture perfect. I'm finding out that less and less can you hold paper in your hand and sort of read it. You have to sort of know it and give more of a performance. For the most part, Tom, it's not that romantic. You just get in there and they say, okay, John, this is Jerry Seinfeld, and oh yeah, Julia, and you've met so-and-so, and I'm so-and-so. Okay, let's run the scene. You stand here, you stand here. Okay, let's run it again. All right, let's bring in the producers. All right, let's bring in the camera people. All right, let's bring in the tech people. You run it about 7 times, and they say, okay, why don't you go and get dressed, and we'll shoot it in an hour. Okay, thank you. And that's how it works.
Yeah.
One of my best experiences was working with Sidney Lumet, who, if you read his book, Making Movies, talks about rehearsal. And what he did was he taped out all the sets in a gymnasium, and you got to work with him and the other actors well in advance of going to camera and going in front of crew and everything. And I think if you're a filmmaker, it truncates a lot of the time on the set, but it's an added expense on the front end of getting actors to rehearse and getting them in there. But you work with the directors and people shape things. When you work on Seinfeld, you're listening to what they're saying. When you work with John Hughes, you're working with Guillermo del Toro, you're in the presence of people that are literally, putting you and placing you into their masterpiece. I think that requires a certain amount of malleability.
Yeah, it's interesting you use the word masterpiece, but sometimes the process, it sounds like it's a big mechanism. It is quite literally a production, and it's just kind of interesting how a director manages to have a vision and shape it, given all these component parts and all the things that are going on. I just have a question. You mentioned that it's getting more and more competitive in your business. It seems to me that on the one hand, you have more things on Netflix and Showtime that have been generated, that now being generated in greater numbers than ever before. Is the competition coming from, the internet to the extent that there are more and more people, just cascading in? It's easier to submit videos and so on and so forth, and that's why there's just a glut of people to pick through. What exactly are the dynamics making it more competitive?
Well, I think that every year you have more and more schools turning out more and more people, and I find that there are more and more schools, high schools of performing arts, churning out kids. I think that there is more attention to the arts in terms of, and more credibility that it's a place where you can make a living within the American mainstream. It was not so when I was a kid. It was looked upon something outre out there. But now it seems to be a credible option for the middle class kid. You can become a lawyer, a doctor, an actor, a mechanic, or whatever. People are making stuff all around the world. Peter Jackson in New Zealand, and Guillermo del Toro is headquartered now in Toronto. So I think that creates a different dynamic in terms of the character and the people out there. And yeah, as you said, mechanism is one aspect of it, but to get all these things in place and to get people into the room and do it all, yeah, it requires a mechanism. But once you're in the room, that's when it's fun, right? Tom can attest to this. You got to lug the equipment, and you got to set up the mics, and you got to get everything and balance it and do the sound check, and then that's sort of the technical yada. But then boom, there is the art of it, and
yeah.
I was waiting around for like 12 hours the other day to shoot something for 5 minutes, and there's the old Laurence Olivier line. They pay me for waiting. The acting is free, and that's what I felt like.
You were describing how, people come onto the set and you pretty much, you have some contextual information and you ask some questions, but basically it seems to me, by the way you're describing it, 75%, 90% of it needs to be there. Of course, the other remaining percent is going to be shaped by the director. They'll coax something out of you. But I say mechanism because, just like any kind of mechanism, any kind of process like that, some of the stuff, you just slot in and you just make it all work.
Yeah, and it's and in that regard, I take what you're saying. I mean, I think of it almost like a ball game, like you put in a new shortstop. It's like not the guy's not learning shortstop right then and there, He's done his thing, and that's why he's gotten into the bull dugout, and now he's, playing shortstop. So it's that way in the movies, too. And when you're in that room, you really do feel like you're working with the best, when it's a really great situation.
Yeah.
And I've been in plenty of great situations, and that's a fun feeling.
It's interesting because you go from project to project, and we've talked about this, and you've got to deal with multiple personalities. You're going from one director to another who may have very different styles and different actors, of course, who have different methods and, I guess pun intended. After years in Hollywood, has that ability to be so flexible, has that gotten a little easier for you, or are they always changing the goalpost, where the end zone is?
Well, I think the thing is that that I look at it sort of holistically and know my career. But when you go in, when people are meeting you, from project to project, there have been times when I've done so much so many dramas in a row that people say, well, can John do comedy? I go, yeah. I mean, if you thought we worked in Second City, but that has truly happened several times, as a matter of fact, because I've immersed myself in drama sometimes as a result of either not getting the work in comedy that I wanted, or comedy's going away that, it's just was not working for me. I think the notion of malleability and the ability to work with people, I mean, the fact of the matter is, Tom, is that as you get older, I mean, let me put it this way: when I was in my early 20s, I had sort of contempt for older actors, thinking, "Oh God, so and so, yeah, he's this and that. How does he keep on working?" And after being in it for 2-3 years, I had an enormous amount of respect for anybody that was in it over 6 minutes, and the fact that people keep on working shows it's almost like people in real life, as you guys are. They keep on growing and living and getting older and being able to understand changes in life. There are changes in Hollywood. People have different ways of working. And all of a sudden, you're working with a new crop of 20-year-old directors and executives, etc. And they don't know who the heck you are, and nor do they care at some point. They haven't developed the veneer of respectability, or of wanting to be respectable towards others. They're just sort of in their own cocksure phase. And and as an adult, you as a grown-up, you sort of go, okay, well, this too shall pass. You kind of admire their moxie, and you also learn from it, because I do think succeeding generations are better than us, and I don't like it when I work with adults that think it was the model types, that it's never as good as it was, because that's just sort of bogus. And so there are always new and interesting people to work with, and I think that that's really the best attitude to employ. And in terms of understanding what's coming next, what's happening as you get older is you start playing older guys. So I'm wrapping my head around playing, grandfathers now, not fathers, and different types of people, right? So that never ceases to get boring, because it's just always, for me, observing behavior in people around me, which is kind of the way I've been since year one. So that process, I think, is something that you just sort of grow into. There are actors that start off hot and sort of, over the years become hacks. And then there are ones that sort of start off okay and then become better. And I hope that I fall into that latter category, because I always want to sort of make it better. I don't want to phone it in. I never phone it in.
We really did have a good time, a lot of fun, and you shed some light on some very interesting stuff with being in the industry for as long as you have and still doing great things all the time. John Kapelos has been our guest. You've seen him on shows from Seinfeld and X-Files and West Wing and NCIS. List goes on. And of course, his classic role in Breakfast Club. He's been in Shape of Water, you name it. And he's working again right now in Canada, working on a new series. So, John, thanks.
Tom Alexander and Charles Epstein.
Wrapping things up now on Work in Progress, along with Charles Epstein. I'm Tom Alexander. Hey, Charles.
Hey, Tom. First of all, I hope that Jude appreciated our careful selection of that particular Beatles tune. We obviously try to avoid the obvious, but I thought that was an appropriate choice. No?
Yeah, no, very good. Very good. You never want to be too on the nose, right?
No, absolutely. Yeah. But I have to say, talking with her, and anytime we talk about this issue, we're just reminded of how devilishly complicated it is. Every decision has implications. Nothing is in a vacuum. It's just such a fraught topic. It's as much about total rewards and compensation models as it is about psychology. There's just all these things you got to deal with. And I think I need to claim the it's all about the Tubman's hashtag before someone poaches that. I'm afraid. Yeah. Now that it's out of the bag,
Right.
I need to own
Yeah,
that.
you do have to own that.
Yeah,
There's
I
no
think so.
question.
I think so. And John Kapelos, your buddy. Wow, impressive career.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, he's done a ton of movies and some major, major films, and oftentimes some small roles, but pivotal roles. And it is sort of one of those, oh, I know that guy. Oh, I've seen that guy a million times.
Sure.
It can become a very, very rewarding, lucrative career. And being the everyman, and John has been the everyman and has played, many, many roles, many diverse roles.
Yeah. From talking to him, it sounds like the secret is preparation. You need to come to the set with the role pretty much nailed down, at least 75, 90%. And just like any profession, you get a rep for being reliable.
Yeah.
And as we discussed in the interview, these are usually massive productions where every minute is accounted for. So if you've proven that you can come in, do your job, get in, get out, no muss, no fuss, you're valuable in that business.
Absolutely. And of course, and a lot of people don't know this, John also is a musician and singer, and actually sings around with big bands in LA. And does a lot of what you would call crooner music, lounge music, and he's been doing that as well, and he and I have actually gotten to collaborate on a couple of little things, which has been fun. And yes, he's become a good friend, and now an official friend of the pod, if you will. So our guests, yes, Jude Sotherland, John Kapelos, and of course, join us next time on Work in Progress when we'll be speaking to other movers and shakers. For Charles Epstein, I'm Tom Alexander. Thanks so much for listening. We'll see you next time. So long, everybody.
This has been Work in Progress, a World at Work podcast about work, life, and everything in between, with award-winning radio host Tom Alexander and WorkSpan's Not Safe for Work columnist Charles Epstein. For more, visit worldatwork.org/work-in-progress. That's worldatwork.org/work-in-progress. Join us next week for another edition of Work in Progress.